Okay, so let's talk about some key administrative principles. I've already alluded to some of this material. This is what happens when I teach classes repeatedly, is that I get ahead of myself in the notes. But these are some things I want us to note in the establishment of administrative principles. Because here's the thing I don't want us to lose sight of as we talk about organization, administration, manuals, all of these things. I do not want us to lose sight of the fact that people matter more than programs. Okay? People matter more than programs. And actually, that's our first point here. I wasn't even looking at the notes. But people are more important than programs or structure. So we can make a structure that is so restrictive that it does not create any opportunity for new people to come be a part of it because they didn't know how to navigate the rules. You know, an appropriate video in this spot here. How many of you have ever seen Seinfeld, the Soup Nazi episode? You guys are too young, don't you?
I think so. I don't remember.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, you
guys are just too young, aren't you? It's hurtful. That's hurtful. Michael, do you know what I'm talking about?
No soup for you.
Yeah, no soup for you. So what it was is that you would have to come in order specifically the exact right way. Otherwise, the soup Nazi would not give you soup. And it was apparently the best soup in the city. It's fun. But sometimes we can establish structures and organizations in our process of creative administration that makes it impossible for people to participate. So this is a question we get every year at our Great Turkey Giveaway. You know, we do every year. We do give out 1,000 to 2,000 turkeys, right? And people ask this question. Well, how do you know they really need a turkey? I don't. What if they're scamming the system between them and God? Could we establish a policy that required them to provide some income verification? Absolutely we could. Absolutely they would. We could make it so ridiculously strict in order to get a turkey that we could guarantee everyone that got a turkey really needed a turkey. But our purpose is to meet the needs of people. So if people are so destitute in their own moral values that they feel they need to steal a free turkey, okay, well, that's between them and God. And you know what? If we met a need that they didn't actually have, yeah, we're okay. It's between them and God. It's like with the after party with the pastor that we just did last week. One of the things that we were doing was giving away free movie tickets to first-time guests. And somebody asked me, well, how are we going to make sure they're first-time guests? Well, they have to come to the booth, and they have to fill out the card. Well, are you guys going to check that they wouldn't already have them in the database? No. Well, then, so you're just going to trust them? Yeah. Well, I said, listen, if they got to steal a $10 movie ticket, that's between them and God, really. So we can create structures that make it so unbearable that all of the rules are followed, but nobody can make it. Or we can create a structure that is inviting to people, that still provides the organization that's necessary without being restrictive. So we have to remember, people are more important than programs or structures. So we use this illustration in children's ministry. We talk about red rules and blue rules. Red rules are rules that do not change. In children's ministry, we have really one red rule. We have a couple that are pretty reddish, but I can probably bend them. Well, one real red rule that we run for everything in children's ministry, two red rules. Everyone must have a pickup tag to pick up a child. Okay? You must have the appropriate pickup tag, and everyone that works in children's ministry is background checked. Those are the absolute, adamant, hardcore, we don't break those rules for anything. Except for the pickup tag, which I can pick any kid that I want to. I don't need to have a pickup tag, but that's the advantage of being in charge. So, but I background check myself, even though I know I'm good. I still had a background check run on me. Why? So that way, no one can accuse me of doing anything improperly. And it just provides verification for the church. We background check employees. Anybody that handles money or works with children. So ushers, our count team, youth workers, children's workers, we background check them all. Why? For safety. Now, let's give you an example of a blue rule. A parent comes, first time here with us. They've got a first grader and a third grader. Now, in our structure, first graders and third graders do not go to the same class. But the third grader's having some anxiety, and they would like to stay with their brother who's in first grade. Okay, here's what we do. Absolutely, they can go to the same class. We just ask that maybe next week they try their own. They come the next week. Yeah, they don't want to. Okay, we'll try again next week. And we give them some time to get adjusted to being here. Why? Because we want to invite them in. We want to be able to minister to parents. There are some, I've been a part of some conversations online. Children's ministry is an amazing example of when rules can run amok. I had watched conversations online of other children's pastors saying, well, this is the policy in school, so it's our policy here. Listen, they also have to do homework in order to move on to the next grade in school. We don't make them take tests in Sunday school in kids' church. There's all sorts of things the school does that I don't. So just because the school does it doesn't mean I have to. And so I actually, I had a parent ask about keeping kids together the entire time they're in children's ministry, from first grade through fifth grade, and they're in different grades. And so that brought me to the question of, the classes all cover the same thing. Do we really have to separate the kids? So that's the question I asked. And so the answer I came up with is no, we don't have to separate the kids for teaching. That's not necessary. But yes, we have to separate the kids so the parents know where to pick them up. If I had a way to notify parents what classroom their kid would be in with it changing every week, I would be okay with kids going to different classrooms every week. But I don't have a way of doing that. That's the challenge. Because they're all learning the same lesson. It's taught in a slightly different manner, but that's the evaluation of what a policy and procedure, whether it's restrictive or whether it's conducive to ministry. The background check, why do we do that? Because there are bad people in this world. One of my friends, they were one of the first churches in the country to start running background checks on people in the early 80s. And in his years on staff at that church, they caught, over 17 years, he caught, it's like 12 convicted pedophiles trying to work in children's ministry. And one of them, as they were being arrested, he asked them, why did you even try? And the guy said, because most churches don't check. That's an example of a red rule. We check everybody. In God we trust, everyone else we check. Yeah. So, but we have to establish structures. There are certain things, and understand, in policies and procedures where rules can bend or break or where they cannot change. And one of the things that we have to understand is what those are and when those exist. And in our evaluation, people are more important than programs and structures. But if I understand what the red rules are versus the blue rules, if somebody says to me, yes, I have a conviction for being a pedophile, but I really feel called to work with kids. It's a red rule, kids. You are not working with children. Why? People go, well, where's grace? Shouldn't it be one of... I'm not saying you can't be saved, but our sin has consequences. David's sin had consequences. Why wasn't he allowed to build the tabernacle? Why wasn't Moses allowed to see the promised land? Sin has consequences. Do I believe that Moses died in God's favor? Yeah, but there were still consequences for his sin. There are consequences for our sin. That was the, we can get into a Christian ethics conversation if we're not careful. That was the thing, you guys don't, children, you guys don't even know who Jeffrey Dahmer is, do you?
Yeah, I know Jeffrey.
I know you do. I know you
Oh, but thank you, I'm not young. Oh
well,
my gosh, that hurt.
They're like 10.
I know.
They're 10. I mean, seriously. How old are you? How old are you?
21.
Okay, so you were born in 1993. Yeah, started my senior year of high school. 21, 20, you were born in 1994, the year I graduated high school.
I was born in 91.
Jeffrey Dahmer was a serial killer that cut people up, stuck them in trash cans in his basement, and ate them. So when he got arrested, ended up in prison, and he found Jesus. So there was all of this conversation in the Christian church that he's been forgiven by God, so we should forgive him too, because he's a changed person. Listen, if you kill people, cut them up, put them in trash cans, and eat them, you can find Jesus 7 times a day, and I still want you behind bars.
It's kind of like Paul or Saul, Paul and Saul. Like came from the same situation. He did all those things as a Christian, but for him to come back.
Yeah. He didn't eat them.
He didn't.
Eat them.
Yeah, the eating them.
I would say his evil was evil, for he's still people.
There's still grace and forgiveness, but there's still because here's the crazy thing: Paul wasn't breaking the law; he was breaking a moral law. But there are still ramifications, and so Dahmer found Jesus. He was killed in prison, by the way. He found Jesus, but he had to stay because there were consequences for his sin.
Yeah,
there are earthly consequences.
They let him out, or like the church would definitely try to get him out, and everyone else would be like, "Oh, I found Jesus too."
Yeah.
Yeah. I only killed 8 people. I didn't eat them.
Yeah. I don't understand the psychological damage it causes you to eat people. So, red rules, blue rules, administrative structure, people matter more than programs. People matter more than programs. But there are certain things that we still have to understand and learn. So, each person in the body of Christ has a function or ministry to perform. The ultimate aim of church leaders should be that of serving rather than being served, which is consistent in Matthew 20:28. The Son of God came to serve, not to be served. So that's our role as Christian leadership. Leaders must be willing to accept the responsibility for directing the ministry of the local church, which that means more so than just preaching. That means organizing also. Here's some of the key principles we need to understand. Lay leaders must be developed to share the responsibility for ministry. We saw that in the section talking about the disciples not wanting to wait tables, but to appoint those. A clearly defined administrative structure is essential. All positions in the church ministry are important. Policies and administration need to be written and communicated openly. These are just some concepts that we want to make sure we understand as we're talking about setting up structure and organization. We can't have secret rules that people don't know about. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It creates confusion. It's the way we want things done versus the way things actually are done. Oftentimes there's those unwritten rules that people don't understand, and it creates challenges structurally. Delegating responsibility to others is a vital part of the administrative leadership. Overseer is different than doer. Overseer is different than doer. So I talked about in your policy manuals and in your final project for your case study, not making duties assigned to staff positions you don't have. Listen, if you detail a volunteer structure in your organization that answers those roles that might be a paid staff member, that's acceptable. See, sometimes we think every job in a church has to be completed by somebody that's paid. But that wouldn't even be biblical, would it? I tell my small group leaders in children's ministry that one of the reasons they are so essential and important in the process of children's ministry is because they fulfill a pastoral role that I cannot. When you have 250, 300 kids coming every week, I can't minister to them individually. Pastor Dan, Pastor Joel, even the 3 of us, we can't minister to them individually. But with 30 or 40 small group leaders, we can start ministering to them. So understand that delegating responsibility to others is a vital part of administrative leadership. nowhere in the scriptures can you find it where it says you have to do it all. And you aren't gifted to do it all. Having volunteer leadership is a wonderful, wonderful tool, and it is a great way to expand your ability. Here's what delegation is great at doing. As we talk about time management, which is actually the last section that we talk about in this, we talk about self-administration and self-management in the day. Delegating is a wonderful example of how you get to do more by using the time of others. So you say there's only 24 hours in a day, but if you can get 3 other people helping you to do the work, you got 96 hours to work with, if you can get more than 24 hours a day, which is harder. But you have a whole lot more opportunity if you utilize the time of others. That's what delegating does for you. Delegating also allows you to focus on the right things. So developing, motivating, and staffing lay leaders in position of responsibility is one of the most important functions of pastoral leadership. I don't think we can say that enough. Developing, motivating, and staffing lay leadership and leaders in positions of responsibility is one of the most important functions of pastoral leadership. But again, you can't put people in positions of leadership, you can't put people inside the structure of your organization if you don't have a structure. So oftentimes the reason more people aren't involved serving is because they don't know where they fit. They don't know where they would plug in. They don't know where they would connect. They don't know what they would do, so why would they be involved? So those are the things that we have to keep in mind as we talk about administration and organization and structure. Any questions as we talk about those key principles? Structure, delegation, organization. Is that fairly self-explanatory?
Could a children's pastor also be in charge of the youth as well? Or
Sure.
do they both need to be separate?
They can both be, I mean,
Depending on the size of the church.
depends on the size of the church. I think the reason that a lot of churches choose to have separate ones is that people aren't good at setting up structure. So, you know, I mean, technically youth and children are under me, so is young adults and velocity. But I couldn't manage that all by myself. Between Pastor Dan, Pastor Joel, Pastor John, and Pastor Telvin, that's what makes that possible. And if I didn't have paid staff, they would have to be led by volunteer staff. It would have to be led by volunteers. So, but a lot of times people don't set up structure. So, you know, I mean, I've got, if you look at the areas of responsibility that I have communications, human resources, security, IT, children's, youth, young adults. I teach at Bethel College. I couldn't do that without structure. So like security's under me. I don't meet with the security team. I don't set up the schedule. I got 2 volunteers that handle that. You know, I oversee it. I don't do it. And that's the same thing with children's and youth. Could one person do that? Absolutely. But it goes back to understanding the role of a leader. So this is one of the things that we talk about with all of our pastoral staff and all of our volunteers. What is the role of a director or pastor here at Bethel? To identify, recruit, train, deploy, and coach volunteers. That's what we do. It's not necessarily to be the one that always teaches. It's not necessarily to be the one that is always making the phone calls. It's not necessarily the one that's always doing the work. What Ephesians 4 says that the roles, the 5 offices, were given to prepare the people of God for works of service. And the challenge that we have is a lot of people set up structures that, much like Steve Jobs, everything hinges on them doing it. And so that doesn't work. I remember having a conversation with somebody. They were talking about an idea they had for volunteer recruitment. They said, I want to get all of our existing volunteers to give us names of people that we could call to connect with them. What was the problem with that? Is that it made the responsibility of the calling central to the leader. When in reality, if we're preparing people for works of service, what should we do? We should equip our volunteers to be the ones doing it. So, in answer to your question, could somebody do youth and children's effectively? Absolutely. It would just require them to function as an overseer, not a doer. And we have a lot of people in ministry that are strictly doers. They want to be the one doing it all the time. So if you want to grow, you have to figure out ways to build structure that allow you to grow. You have to figure out ways to build structure that allow you to minister to more. Because why would God give you more than the 10 kids that you have right now if you can't even follow up with them? So that's the importance of delegation, that's the importance of structure. It's because it allows us to set up those things. And that's it's a leadership concept, but it's applicable in administration. Because most people don't think beyond this. They think I've got to be the one that does this. And so I have a friend that recently took a new job at a church, and I was asking him about the structure of the organization. And I told him, I said, you need, because he went from a church of like 400 to a church of like 1,500. And so I was talking about how his role was going to change. And I said, in your job description, what does it say about teaching kids church? I said, does it say you have to teach kids church, or you have to make sure kids church is taught? Because there's a big difference between those two. And so he looked through it, and it actually listed him as the children's pastor will be the primary instructor on Sunday mornings in kids church. So I told him, I said, you need to go to your pastor and ask him, can we make that I'm to have oversight? And so he did, and he did. And they made that change. Why was that important? Because if you're the one that has to always do it, then you don't have the opportunity on a Sunday morning to invest in your team that's teaching. You don't have the Sunday morning opportunity to express appreciation for your team. You don't have that opportunity to recruit new people. Why? Because you're always busy doing it. So you can't grow if you're always the one doing it. Yeah.
Like sometimes you have, like if you're in leadership and you have someone who's appointed to be an overseer, and then you're finding while you're trying to lead, the overseer continues to kind of come in, and they're not like in the process, like when you're planning things and doing things, like let's say with the team, and the overseer, you know, they're overseeing, but then sometimes they'll come in and change this, they'll go back out, come in and do things, you know. And then what do you do in a situation when you have an overseer that's too involved, because that's hindering, it's not just hurting the overseer, right, but it's also hurting the growth of those on the team, because it's over-involvement. You know what I mean? It's like not...
What do you mean by over-involved?
Well, I think like when you're delegating leadership, don't you have to at least give the person, and I understand that sometimes you do have to make decisions and you have to step in as an overseer, but when it's always like you're not overseeing, you're doing it, and the team is not. It's like you're doing everything, and the team is just sitting there watching you, and you're making all the decisions.
Like micromanaging?
Yeah.
They haven't actually delegated.
Yeah, it's not delegation. It's like, but it's like there's a situation where this overseer, she'll sit back and she'll let the team make all these plans, and then at the end of the meeting, like she'll come in and say, well, why don't we just do this? And then change everything. So all the other people's input, everything the team has done, it's like you erased, and she just starts all over and just does it the way she wants it done.
So now the precarious line to walk in that conversation is all of us function, even me as an executive pastor, I function with a delegated authority. The authority that I carry is delegated to me by Pastor Glenn. So his authority still supersedes mine. So I can make plans, and I can come up with ideas, but he can still choose to do something different. So but being a good leader also recognizes when you have delegated authority, sometimes it means that people aren't going to do it the way you want to do it. John Maxwell's got a great little pithy statement. He says that if somebody can do it 80% as well as you can, let them do it. It gives you the opportunity to grow, but also gives the leader the opportunity to focus on other things. My guess would be that Michael said it, the person that is supposed to have delegated things is actually a micromanager. And that only works so long before the team goes, all right, what do you want to do? And they stop asking questions. So if you have the relationship with the overseer, the opportunity you have is to have the conversation of, this is some of the things I've seen that have happened. Are we fulfilling the role that you want us to do? Or would you prefer to direct us differently? Because it doesn't have to be a confrontation. It can be this is how things have functioned, this is how we've understood our role. How is it that you're understanding our role? You know, I've had senior pastors I've worked with that I had to go into their office one time because it was a guy I was working for in California. He'd given me so much responsibility, so much work to do. I was in charge of children's ministry. I was in charge of our website. I was in charge of our sound and media. I was also in charge of follow-up for visitors. I was in charge of the budget as the children's pastor. He was getting ready. I had also been given ushers, and he was getting ready to give me senior adult ministry. And so I went into his office and I said, I want to serve you however I can, but I am at the limit of what I can do. So what I need you to do, and I listed out all the things that I had responsibility for. I said, what I need you to do is to give me a prioritization list of what you want me to work on, what gets the most focus, because I can't give everything the same level of focus with the amount of responsibility that I have. And I let him make the determination. And I think a lot of times for him, and this could very well be the case for the person that you're working with here, he didn't realize all of the things that he had already given me. And a lot of times, the people that do that, where they come in and they blow up what's already going on, is they don't even realize they're doing it. And it's a sense of obliviousness. They think they're being helpful, oftentimes. I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. And so it might just be a gentle conversation of, you know, the team has done a lot of work for this, and you came in and changed the plans, which is your right as the leader, but can we make sure that we have a clear understanding of what the role you want us to fulfill? And I have a tendency to try and give them the benefit of the doubt, and so that means in the list of confrontation styles, I'll get a little more like a lamb and just say, I must have misunderstood. Or is there a way you want us to do it differently? Because you can get like real sharky and go, hey, what the heck are you doing here? You gave us a job and we did it and then you blew it up. But that doesn't help in the long term. So in those kind of situations, a lot of times you're dealing with leaders that either they lack self-awareness of what they're doing, they lack security in decisions, so they feel the need to micromanage things, or they just don't know what they're doing.
Well, she's confessed that she's a perfectionist, that she overdoes it with details. She admits that those are faults, but she doesn't do anything to change it. She just continues to do it. You know, and so the team just kind of, and the meetings are hilarious because people just sit there and they just don't talk. It's gotten to that point.
Yeah.
We didn't start out that way, but it's gotten to the point where...
We've probably had people start dropping off the team.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Well, and that's ultimately the decision of followers. They decide if they're going to follow the leader, especially when the leader acknowledges faults yet doesn't change. So, you know, everyone thinks that acknowledging your fault is a big deal. It's the entrance to a big deal. Acknowledging your fault's great. Doing something about it, that's what matters.
Amen.
So, now, if we deal with it in grace, and that really depends upon the relationship that you have with the individual. I've had people have some difficult conversations with me when I've done things poorly, and I've had some difficult conversations with other people when they've done things poorly. But it's all come from the relationship. Otherwise, it just looks like you're taking pot shots at them. So I don't know what kind of relationship you have with the gal that's leading. I don't know if it's one that she can acknowledge the faults, but not recognize what it's doing to the team. I think a lot of people, they're oblivious as to why, why people don't want to follow them, why people don't want to be a part of them. I think a lot of people they lack self-awareness.
Yeah.
So
just so happens that like people just having like there used to be a lot of involvement in a particular ministry, and it just dwindled drastically. I mean, and it's not. I would just be honest. It's just really not thriving. I mean, it's not aligning.
Is this a new leader? Is she new to being in charge, or she's been there for a while?
Been there for a while.
She's probably had a couple of teams do this to her then.
But she's been through quite a few team members.
Yeah.
quite a few, high turnover.
Yeah.
No one sticks with it. It's just, I guess they say it's just too much of a complicated situation.
Mhm.
And that individual is close to the pastor also, that kind of complicates it.
She lacks self-awareness. She does. I mean, based upon the description there, either that or she might be self-aware, but she might not care. Yeah, I mean, that's always the possibility. You know, I know my faults and I'm just going to live with them because I'm comfortable. But, you know, in order to get that, it's either going to take people, this is a John Maxwell thing again. People change when the pain of not changing becomes greater than the pain of changing. But typically it takes pain to change. So she's been able to get enough people on the team to replace the ones that have left, that the pain of not changing doesn't exist. So that's the hard thing. It's a hard place to be in leadership. But ultimately, I mean, this is the choice we have as leaders and followers, is that as followers we can choose to continue to serve somebody that has demonstrated a lack of ability or desire to change, in hopes that they will change, or we can stop. Those are our options. But here's the thing, is that we can help people see, but we cannot produce change in their life.
That's true.
So, yeah, and that's the hard thing. And I think it goes back to why a lot of small things stay small. It's because the leader isn't willing to change, and they're not willing to delegate effectively. Any other questions? We're just getting all sorts of little leadership lessons in here too. That's good. It's normally what I teach is leadership as opposed to administration. So these are some key administrative principles. Honestly, getting right down to it, the core of this is remembering people matter. People matter. So